Hello and welcome to Read or Watch. We are your hosts. I am Michelle and this is Ashton.
Hi.
In this segment, we will be talking about Watchmen.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. Will we ever? Though important to point out, we are primarily focusing on the graphic novel versus the movie, with a little bit of sprinkling of TV show, but not that much TV show. We're trying to keep true to the fact that the movie is an adaptation of the graphic novel pretty closely, whereas the TV show is not. It is more of a sequel than anything else. So,
Yeah.
with that in mind, I'm going to let everybody know that I am typically a reader. I like to read things before I watch them, and that is true in this case. I actually did read the graphic novel long before I saw the movie.
Yeah, and I'm typically a watcher. Usually I enjoy movies before I go back and read the source material. In this case, yeah, I watched the movie before I read the graphic novel.
So,
What's
with
it
that,
about?
what's the graphic novel about? God, good question. So it takes place in 1985. It's pretty much about a group of, we'll call them masked heroes, dealing with the fact that one of their own was murdered. This all takes place during the Cold War between the States and the Soviet Union. And it's really just a collection of characters trying to figure out what the heck is going on.
What the heck?
What the heck? That's truly what this is. For anyone who has not read or watched this, we're not going to be doing a full-on explanation, so you may not know what the heck we're talking about sometimes. I'd recommend you read and or watch. We'll tell you at the end what you should do, but we
Yeah.
recommend consuming the content so that you understand what we're about to be discussing. So jumping right into the discussion, the first thing I want to talk about is the casting of the movie.
Yeah.
The casting.
Yeah,
What did you
don't
think?
I actually really liked a lot of the casting. Like there were definitely major differences around like some characters that you say read in the graphic novel as opposed to watched on screen. Like I think of Rorschach, because like the description he has in the book versus the person that you see on screen. Like there's definitely some differences there. Although the big one that I know that we've both thought about is Ozymandias.
Yes. My gosh. So it's weird because it's wrong. It's so wrong. It's so wrong. And I
You
could
think so?
see how someone, yes, like I'm mad at it, honestly. I could see how somebody who had seen the movie would already have that picture of him in their brain. But when you
Mhm.
read the graphic novel first, and there's very, very clear descriptions of him and his skills that don't translate to the physical being of the actor. So what I mean by that is in the graphic novel, they talk actually a lot about his athletic prowess. And he's like a
Mhm.
gymnast and he's super strong and he has like all of these things. He's like regarded as an athlete.
Yeah.
And the dude they cast is just like a normal looking shape of a man. Like I was expecting like broader shoulders, buffer,
Well, I
that sort of
mean,
situation.
even in like the artwork for the graphic novel, like he's a beefcake.
Yeah, he totally is, and they talk a lot about that. It's, like,
Yeah.
mentioned in many, many scenes, and it doesn't translate to the movie in particular, and then, like, this is the thing I'm sure anyone who has read and watched is aware of. Why does he have an accent in the movie? He has a German accent occasionally. That's not a thing. He's not a German character, like, there's no description of
Was it
that.
was it
He
not a
was
thing of
born.
his accent in the book?
No,
Because I don't know if I ever really mentioned like they describe his tone of voice. I don't know if they really mention an accent.
no, he's, like, fully born in America.
Well, he was
So
born
there's
in
no
America,
description.
to first generation immigrants.
Yeah, but I don't know. It felt like I hated the accent in the movie because sometimes
I
he
see.
was putting on the American, sometimes he did the German. I was like,
Yeah,
I
that's true.
don't
There was
think
a bit of a
so.
back and forth at times, wasn't there?
Yeah, and
Although I
because
mean,
he presented himself as like all of the heroes, I guess I'll call them, all of the masked people
mhm.
present themselves as like the American dream, the American hero. Like that's really what it is. The only ones who didn't necessarily do that were the woman whose name I can't remember.
uh, you talking about Jupiter?
No, no, not her. The other, the German lady, like the lady who's actually German. It doesn't matter. She was
Uh,
in
uh,
the Minutemen. Pull up a picture of her here. There's the
oh,
lady in black. The
Silhouette.
one. Thank you. So I knew it was another S word. Silhouette is the only one that was like very clearly described as being German, the only one. So
Hmm.
I don't know, I thought it was really interesting, and I really hated that about him in the movie in particular. Just because he was supposed to be representing, like, all of them were supposed to be representing, like, quote unquote American ideals, and having the
Right.
German accent at that time just felt really, it felt weird to me. It kind of took me out of it a bit. What was your issue with him?
I mean, I don't know if I really had like, I mean, okay, so I think I'll definitely agree with you in terms of the physique because that was that, like, especially if I had read it first, that would be very jarring to go from the person they describe as, or I don't know if they describe it, but you see him in the graphic novel, and it's like he could have been carved like in a likeness to Michelangelo's David.
Hmm.
But then um, I mean, like you said, he's almost looks like some normie in the movie. So
Yeah.
there's not really that sort of Atlas physique to him. Like the guy does an amazing job, in my opinion, of like portraying the intellect to Ozymandias and like the emotional weight of everything. But
Hmm.
I'll definitely agree with you that the physique was very jarring. Um, I don't know. I don't know if the accent really bothered me as much. Just for the idea of him being I don't know if that'd be no, he would be a first generation immigrant,
Hmm.
born on American soil and all that. But I don't know. I mean, he got the intellect of the character right for me. And I can kind of see if they were going for, say, a physique built on speed, because that was a major point of the character as well.
Yeah, the
You know, there's
catching the
someone
bullet. I don't know
so
why I didn't like that with little
you know,
fingies.
his classic, yeah, bullet comes flying at you. Eh.
That's not quite how he did it, but that's how I would do it, and that's why I wouldn't live. So,
No, you'd be good
um,
enough. Just took it out of the air.
grab it. The okay, so here's the running theme with my issue with the casting is just like the physical presence of different actors and like the way their body shapes are. I have gripes with.
Oh,
The
really?
one, yeah, another one is Dr. John Osterman in particular, not Dr. Manhattan. I don't have a problem with Dr. Manhattan's physique. Besides,
Specifically with the guy he was.
yes, the guy he was, because in the comic he is just as buff as he turns into. So he's quite tall. Like he's significantly taller than Wally Weaver. There's a scene, like a panel in the graphic novel of those two walking beside each other, and
Yeah.
John is significantly taller and broader than him. So when he turns into Dr. Manhattan, he reforms himself, like his physical presence
Right.
mainly. And in the movie, it felt like he turned himself into this pinnacle type of
I
being.
mean, I don't know if you ever really got a good look at his physique in the movie when he was John Osterman.
But he's short. He's short. And he gets a lot bigger and broader for sure. Like when you see him compared to Wally Weaver,
Okay.
it doesn't translate for me. I thought him as an actor, like he was really, really good as that character, and he was really good
Yeah.
as Dr. Manhattan. But of course, they didn't use his body; they used the body of a professional athlete for the
Oh,
Dr.
did they?
Manhattan body. Yeah, I forget exactly what he was, but he was some type of, I think, a bodybuilder, like a pro athlete.
Oh,
Was the
okay.
guy who did the body work. It wasn't the same guy, so we can't give him
Okay, I
credit
didn't
for
know
that
that, so that's really
banging bod.
interesting.
I don't know whose dick it was though, TBH. So, and that's the other issue I have, because the it does make sense for anyone like who hasn't seen this. He turns into this blue being, and he just doesn't feel human anymore. He still looks like a human. He still has the male anatomy, and it makes sense that he's so naked because he's so detached from humanity that there wouldn't be that like shamefulness of being on display all the time.
Hmm.
But I thought the graphic novel did it really tastefully because he is clearly naked all the time, but we don't get as many like front shots. Like the the panel will cut right below the midriff, so you don't always have to be confronted with his business.
Yeah,
I found it really distracting in the movie how often we were actually confronted with his junk. Like it just didn't.
that's pretty fair.
It was. I was just like, no, thank you. It's uncomfortable.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess I mean, adapting anything to film will inherently have problems, especially because you can't. One thing I love about the adaptation is that it does a remarkable job of framing things almost exactly like picture to picture for the graphic novel, but at the same
Mhm.
time, there are going to be problems inevitably where you can't always frame things in the same sort of way.
Yeah.
But I mean, I definitely see what you mean there. There was a what's going on there.
Yeah. There was. So those are my big issues with the characters, but like the visual or the casting of the characters, I would say. I think
I
pretty
think
much everyone else they like totally nailed. Jeffrey Dean
100%.
Morgan as the comedian,
Yeah, he was.
spectacular. Just
Yeah, not
perfection.
just to like not just to like the emotional portrayal of the character, but like physically, like
Mhm.
yeah, like the comedian was bang on for visual speaking. And like the guy they got for Night Owl, like he
Yeah,
could have just walked off the
Patrick
page.
Wilson. He
Yeah.
the only thing I little bit wish is because he put on 35 pounds for the role. I honestly wish he put on a bit more.
Okay,
Um,
that's fair.
because in the comic book, there are quite a few scenes of Dryberg, like Dan, Night Owl,
Hmm.
naked, where we see he's got the little paunch going on. He's got that little dad bod situation, and that
Hmm.
didn't really come across as much. And I
Yeah,
think that
like
was something
he's.
that didn't come across for a lot of the characters, like a lot of the heroes, because they're all supposed to
Hmm.
be like in retirement. They're aging. They're not at that like physical peak that they used to be. Whereas like it's Hollywood, and we're not going to let people get actually fat or, you know what I mean, look anything less
Yeah,
than spectacular. And I think
yeah,
that was a bit of a miss because it didn't feel like such a big jump for the characters to get back into being superheroes or whatever, what have you.
yeah.
I don't like using the word superhero for the
Well, I mean,
Watchmen because
like
it's
in
not.
the comic book, they make the distinction between the Minutemen and the Watchmen, where the
Mhm,
Minutemen they describe as costumed heroes, but
mhm,
especially because the Watchmen brought with them Doctor Manhattan, that's
mhm.
when they say that they went into the age of the superhero. So I think
Yeah.
superhero is a bit more apt in this
Well,
sense.
in this case, the only superhero in the entire thing is Dr. Manhattan because everyone else is supposed to be like human without any
Right.
really extra abilities. You do have Ozymandias. I don't know how to say Ozymandias. Ozymandias? I always say it
Ozymandias.
wrong. I'm gonna mess it up 101 times. I'm sorry, everybody. Um, he is the smartest man alive, but
Yeah.
also they say that, and I don't know if I fully agree because some of
No?
the things that happen, I'm like, I think you could have thought that through. You could have seen that coming. I don't know, but he also can't like read the future or anything, so he, I guess,
Right.
did the best with the information he had.
Well,
I'm
now
not too sure.
is that in reference to the graphic novel or the way it's depicted in the movie?
Honestly, both, because the thing that I think if he was the smartest man alive, he should have seen coming was Dryberg coming out of retirement. He didn't see that coming in both versions. Not that it
Right.
stopped him in any way, but I just
Yeah.
I don't know. He seemed a bit surprised by that. Just like,
I mean,
oh, what
a
up,
bit
Dan?
surprised, yeah, but I mean, in both cases, I got the impression that that he's looking at bigger pictures than say,
Mhm.
like you say, a superhero that wouldn't have stopped him anyway.
Yeah, yeah. It's such an interesting. I don't know. The ending is interesting, but we won't get there yet. We're not
Yeah,
going
not
there
yet.
yet. We're saving that for everybody who
Yeah,
does or doesn't know what that's all about.
keyword yet,
Um.
in that it is inevitable because that's a
Oh yeah.
major point.
Oh, it's huge. You can't talk the movie and the graphic novel and not touch on that at all. That would be
Yeah.
absolutely bananas. So, as someone who read the graphic novel first, there's a few things that upon my first viewing of the movie, I was like, "Where did this go?
Yeah, because
Where is it?"
there's a lot that they. I
Mhm,
mean, and again, speaking to the nature of adaptation, that they inevitably had to cut out. But like even then, there are there's because the graphic novel has so much going for it, and
mhm.
like there's so many different threads and plot points that are almost integral to the tone of the graphic novel. Like if you go to the movie, there's so much that had to get cut out.
Totally. I think you nailed it in the tone. I think the movie did a really good job of trying to portray the overall tone of the graphic novel with the limited time because it ended
Yeah.
up being like I think it's like a 2.5 hour movie for the regular version. That's a 3.5 for the extended,
Yeah.
which does do a little bit better with the tone with the added things, but it still doesn't fully capture it. So the things that
Hmm.
stood out to me, obviously, the most as someone who read the graphic novel first was the Tales of the Black Freighter.
Yeah, which is
So
huge.
which is huge in it's this underline it's when you read the graphic novel, honestly, it's a little bit confusing or it feels a little
Hmm.
weird to be reading it because it is a side story of a character reading a comic book in the comic book. Like it's like this
Yeah.
double layer Inception situation where the character's reading the comic book. But the themes of that comic book, which is the Tales of the Black Freighter, they interweave so perfectly with what's actually going on in the Watchmen story overall that it
Hmm.
adds to the tone unbelievably. Even though in
Yeah.
the extended version of the movie they actually animated those and put them in there, I don't think it doesn't do it justice, unfortunately. But I don't know of a better way for them to have done that. I think
Yeah.
for a movie adaptation it had to be changed and removed. Like it wasn't going to land the same because it
Yeah. I think
felt
like
so, I don't know, it was so in there, it was so like woven in there.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think like especially with the visuals you got from the Tales of the Black Freighter, like I think that's like that going. I mean, having watched the movie first and then going to the graphic novel, there was such a heavier impact in the tone of the thing because that is not a light read. The Tales of the Black Freighter, like every time it cuts into that, like the visuals, the narrative you get, the writing, it's brutal stuff. So like,
Mhm.
especially when you see that being played in parallel to what's happening with the events of the quote unquote real world,
Mhm.
it, I mean, it does so much for the brutality of almost everything that's going on, like the bleakness, I would
Absolutely.
say,
Yes.
especially
I
because,
think
as you said, it like this takes place during the Cold War,
mhm.
so like there's so many bleak notes that you don't get already.
I think I think the movie tries really hard to encapsulate that feeling of foreboding of just what I can only imagine the Cold War would have felt like. It's like the world's gonna
Hmm.
end any day now. And you have to live with that feeling over your head. And I think the movie really, really tried to create that. And I just don't think they did it to the degree that the graphic novel did. Like the graphic novel felt heavy. It felt bleak. Even the ending, like the final scene,
Yeah.
um, just hints to the fact that like it's not over. Nothing's over. It's always gonna be like this kind of that. It was dark. It was just a dark ending, even though it, yeah, it's just dark. I don't know without like saying anything more about it. And I think a lot of that can be attributed to the extra, I don't want to know what to call it, but the extra little inserts into the graphic novel where we're getting
Hmm.
like novel, not graphic, just
I mean,
novel.
literally, because like the what you get in addition to like the panel art of the graphic novel are like it'll be framed as an excerpt from novels, literally. Um,
Wow, I like flipped to
like
those so
where
perfectly by accident. That was
yeah,
amazing.
like you'll have you almost saw it there, where it's like pages of artwork, and then you turn to the next one, and it's just a wall of text.
Mhm.
Which I think to the movie's credit, and I didn't even realize until I went back to revisit the Watchmen movie, is that I think they did as best as they could and a really good job, in my opinion, of like telling some of the stories that were in that wall of text that you wouldn't have had time for, like what happened to all of the heroes, um,
Yes.
which are really only mentioned like in passing or within the novel of saying like who got sent to an insane asylum or who got murdered because
Mhm.
of circumstances of the times,
Yeah.
which is
I
like this it portrayed in like this almost horrifically beautiful sequence off the top of the movie.
yes, I was gonna say that the introduction, the maybe first 5 to 10 minutes of the movie is
Mhm.
in my mind perfection.
Yeah,
The clip of like what happens to the comedian, that whole situation plays out really up until Rorschach fights the police. Like that part, I'm like, eh. But the comedian getting thrown out the window, that whole sequence, is shot for shot exactly what happens in the graphic, and that
yeah.
like is like literally shot for shot. I had like put it up there, Lou. Here's the shot. It's shot for shot. It's spectacular. Already sent it to him
Yeah,
to put
and
up.
like especially with the use of slow motion in that fight sequence,
Mm,
like it'll ramp down to him getting thrown into a mirror or whatever, and it's like you could pull the panel from the comic book and there it is.
yeah, it was beautiful. And then moving into the times they are a changin' song, that
Hmm.
kind of slow scroll of the setting up the world truly of where they're at in terms of the Cold War. what's happening with these masked heroes, like the Keen Act, like all of these things that you get from the extended universe and like those excerpts in the graphic novel is kind of mushed
Hmm.
into that sequence in a way that lands really well. Like that is such a good sequence. I just think it's freaking spectacular and it feels
Yeah.
very true to the comic. I think it starts to go off the rails past that point, but up to that point it's like 10 out of 10 perfect.
Yeah, definitely. Like that is like especially if you go from like reading the graphic novel directly to the movie, like
Mhm.
there's imagery that you get hear described in the comic book that's like again it's like right to picture,
Yeah.
and it's like yeah, it's phenomenal the way they pulled off that sequence.
Yeah.
It is almost a genuinely perfect intro.
Oh, for sure. It's one of my favorite movie intros, just straight up. It's
Yeah,
there's something about the pairing of the music in that scene with the visuals of that scene that just like it works for me so much.
yeah,
But
I would definitely agree with that.
the thing I think they really, really miss, and this is besides the big thing that we'll move into really quickly, is these side stories about the newspaper people. That is
Do you mean
missed in the
in terms
movie.
of like the news vendor or like the
Both.
publisher?
Both. Any the newspaper related stories are pared down
Mhm.
to such a degree in the movie that it doesn't land, it doesn't work. But the thing that I found was really interesting because so like here's my how I've read and enjoyed these things. I read it,
Mhm.
I watched it, I watched the TV show, I read it, I watched the movie. So here's the important tidbit from that. So I was paying extreme attention to the newspaper side story because that's the thing that always, besides the Black Freighter, to me felt just removed completely from all of the stories, including the TV show. I felt like anything newspaper related was not there.
I mean, definitely.
However, however, there's a little nugget in there that actually made the TV show better for me. So anyone who's seen the TV show knows that the TV show takes place in current times. It's a continuation of what the events in the graphic novel and the ending of the graphic novel and the world after that.
Oh, really?
But yes, and
By the way,
one
it should be
of
noted
the
that I haven't seen the TV show. I've only watched the movie.
yeah, you should watch the TV show because it's sick. It doesn't feel necessarily like a Watchmen thing. It doesn't have that same tone. It tackles more current issues as opposed to Cold War. There's a lot of like racial stuff in there, which they handle fantastically. It's freaking spectacular. It's one of my
Okay.
like the show's so good. I'm really disappointed they probably won't do another season because they wrapped it up really really nicely.
Oh, I
But
see.
here's the thing: in the TV show, there is a group of racists that are using Rorschach as their like cult leader. Like he's the guy that they are all we're like the Rorschach group. I forget what they're called. And
Okay.
I was like, wait, why is Rorschach like the headpiece for this racist group?
Yeah.
When you dive back into the graphic novel, there's actually this ongoing like fight between two different newspaper publishing companies. One of them, called the New Frontiersman, is being read by Rorschach. And that one, in the same article that they talk about the fact that why are you villainizing Rorschach for reading us? They go, but the Nazis were cool. We like the Ku Klux Klan. Like literally in the same
Yeah.
sentence, they say
Like,
that. And I was like,
don't they like they just go
that's where
on
that comes from.
like they go on straight up to be like, yeah, the clan were just like
They're
they were going for
chilling.
their
They
country.
believed and stuff. Yeah,
They were fighting
it,
for the conservative values.
exactly. And I just thought that was so interesting because that's if you've watched the movie and then you're watching the TV show, first of all, everything with squids, you're like, what the heck? But then also, why is Rorschach racist? I don't get it.
Yeah,
Just kidding. He actually probably was,
so I
or
think that's
there's
something.
something there.
Yeah, I think that's something that's probably worth touching on in terms of like the difference between the comic and the movie that you just really don't get with the movie is
Yeah.
that I think with the movie, no, the movie definitely had a more heroic nature to it, in my
Mhm.
opinion. Whereas, like, it's almost straight up good guys fighting for what's good, but that's not really the point of the graphic novel, which has
Mhm.
like this whole idea that like you know like take Rorschach for example. In the movie, he's this indomitable force for like justice and what have you.
Mhm.
Uh, but like in the graphic, you go back to the graphic novel. There's this entirely different side to him that you just don't really see. Like like he subscribes to that like hyper conservative uh newspaper. He talks about previous superheroes saying racist things and being like, they were just fighting for their country and what have you. He
Hmm.
said like, the point of the graphic novel is that that almost everyone in this industry, in that hero industry, is a deeply damaged person, and Rorschach especially, to the point where like he will fight to his own damnation. Um,
Yeah.
but so like I think that's definitely another heavy sort of topic to get into.
Hmm.
Um, but that I mean, you'd have to read the graphic novel and well, or watch the TV show for that matter,
Yeah,
because
I
yeah,
mean, the
there's
graphic novel gives you way more of that gray area of what is
mhm,
a quote unquote hero in this universe. And
yeah.
there's one scene in particular that when I watched it in the movie, and I honestly didn't remember where it originated from in the graphic novel, is this it's the dream sequence that Dan Dryberg has, where
Mm.
it's him and Sally Jupiter, right? Is she Sally? What's her name? Lori,
Laurie Jupiter,
Laurel. Yeah,
or no,
Sally's the mom.
Laurie. I always forget the proper name. Juspesic, I think, is the
Yeah,
her surname in the comic.
Silk Spectre too, the kid. We'll call her that.
Yeah.
So it's the two of them, and he's having a dream sequence about the two of them walking towards each other, and they're both dressed in normie clothes, whatever, whatever. And we see them kind of peel back the outer layer of each other to reveal their costumed counterparts. In the background, we see a nuclear explosion. The key difference between that in the movie and that in the graphic novel is actually in the graphic novel, it's not her walking towards him initially. It's
Hmm.
actually a female villain walking towards him. And I think the overall theme of that is how close like the differences are between the heroes and the villains in this, right? Like there's that
That would make sense.
slight difference between the two of them. You peel it back, it's a hero underneath, you peel it back, it's a villain underneath, like that sort of mentality. And I think it wouldn't have made sense in the movie because they never introduced
Hmm.
that female villain character at all.
Yeah.
But I think that feeling is truly, truly lost. So when it comes to that reveal of everything that Ozymandias has been doing, we're like, oh, he's a bad guy. Oh my God, he's the worst. And then in the
Hmm.
graphic novel, I find myself going like, yeah, but like, but also, but maybe, do you know what I mean? That's there's that
Yeah.
questioning element, which is what the graphic novel is meant to leave you with, is like, oh, because throughout the graphic novel, there's this underlying like imagery of fighting for peace and killing for peace and weapons of
Hmm.
peace. The nuclear bomb is described as a weapon of peace. So it's
Hmm.
that underlying concept that is completely lost in the movie. And then they changed the ending of the movie, anyways. But I think the movie ending would land better if they'd established that like killing for the sake of peace like really underlying thing, so it didn't feel so villainous that that was a choice that was being made.
Yeah. So,
Do it.
I
Talk
mean,
about the ending. Let's go
yeah.
there.
So, the one major difference that you will get as a viewer or a reader between the Watchmen movie and what happened in the book is that the ending is almost literally night and day. Um, because, I mean, Michelle's mentioned the squids. What happens in the graphic novel is so ultimately Ozymandias' plan is to unite the world against like an external threat. Um, in the graphic novel, like he gets a bunch of like geneticists and artists um to make this like alien creature, and he frames it as like an alien, an interdimensional alien attack on Earth, uh making this massive squid thing that mysteriously dies on impact while taking out half of New York. Whereas in the movie, he it's framed as being the wrath of Dr. Manhattan,
Mhm.
using different technological things that like wipe out half of, what was it, New York, Beijing, Moscow, like major
The
city
like
centers.
major cities everywhere.
Yeah, which is like there is so much of a tonal difference there because uh like it comes from totally different places, doesn't it? This idea
Hmm.
of like humanity uh going against an alien threat which is like severely sci-fi and what have you, versus coming from something internal, i.e., Doctor Manhattan.
Mhm.
Um, so, what did you make of the movie changing the ending to not being an alien threat? Because I feel like that's a major point of contention to anybody
Yeah.
who's familiar with Watchmen.
So, my opinion of that has actually changed over the years, and
Has it?
yeah, which is really interesting. So, when I first saw the movie and I saw that ending, I loved it. I was like, "Yeah, makes sense. That makes sense, like, the squid
Yeah.
thing's crazy, like, who does that?" I couldn't wrap my head around uniting over the squid. I just couldn't do it. It just felt for a novel that was so grounded in reality of
Yeah.
these are real people. These are, Dr. Manhattan is his own thing, but it's a very a human story, I guess is what I would call it. To be
Yeah.
like, just kidding, here's a squid. Here's a squid with mind control powers because they don't fluff around with that. Like the thing
Yeah,
that's why it killed so many people. It set out a psychic blast that blew up everyone's brains. Like
it's
that's
very specifically a
crazy.
psychic squid that's like
Yeah, it's not
cloned from
just
a
a
psychic's
squid.
mind.
Yeah, it's not just a squid that I still wouldn't have been on board for dropping a squid on New York. But a psychic squid that you stole a dead kid's brain and took his psychic abilities and turned it into a squid monster.
Hmm.
Like that felt like a really, really big stretch for me. Whereas the movie version, honestly, in my little brain, made more sense. I was like, yeah, like that's the one crazy thing on Earth that everyone already knows is there. That doesn't feel like a huge stretch. We already know there's this superpower. And throughout this movie, we've been shown that he has no attachment to humanity. And
Right.
the regular humans have seen that, right? They've seen that he gives people cancer and that he doesn't even care that he like teleported the whole news station outside. Like we've
Hmm.
been seeing his unraveling, so it doesn't feel like such a stretch for him to just be like, screw everybody, I'm on Mars, blow up the world. So that
Yeah.
felt better to me at the time. Now, since rereading, rewatching, and seeing the TV show, which focuses on the aftermath of the squid, the question that comes to my mind is would people truly have united over Dr. Manhattan? Because he is an American icon. I don't think he would have united the world. Like, I don't think Ozymandias being like, Dr. Manhattan did this would actually unite the world in the way he wants it to. Do you know what I mean?
Um,
It'd be
I
like
definitely see what you
the
mean
US
there.
made this happen to us. Like that's what it feels like it would have done as opposed to extraterrestrial squid because it has no allegiance. Whereas the states fucked up Dr. Manhattan and caused this to happen because that's I don't know that feels like what the thought process would be because people want to be divided. And I
Uh,
feel like having that little bit of oh but he's American, right? The Superman exists and he's American. God exists and he's American. It's the
right.
American dream. Blame America. Don't blame Dr. Manhattan. That's what I think would have actually happened. So I don't buy into it anymore. I prefer the squid.
Yeah, I think that makes sense in retrospect because I mean, uh, when I was just a wee little crouton having seen Watchmen for the first time, like I had the same sort of reaction where, like, of course everybody would unite over like Doctor Manhattan because he's a grounded human threat.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then going back to the graphic novel after the fact of watching the movie, I had the exact sort of thing of like that. Where did this squid thing come from? you know, like even though they hint at things so heavily throughout the course of the graphic novel in
Mm-hmm.
terms of like an island of artists and writers or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but like revisiting it now, I mean, I definitely get it more in the idea that yeah, of course, humanity would be more willing to unite over something external. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but I think I still almost lean towards the movie because Doctor Manhattan, I mean, is American or whatever. But at the end of the day, he is still uh, alien to humanity, so
Mm-hmm.
there would still be a sense of like, especially because they very explicitly say that like, or they frame it as Dr. Manhattan is punishing humanity for World War III, so much to the fact that he'll even blow up half of New York, an American
Mm-hmm.
city. So I kind of get it, but at the same time, yeah, the external threat of the squid definitely makes more sense to me. Mind you, I haven't seen the TV show,
Mm-hmm.
so I don't have more of an external frame of reference for like where things would have gone. following the squid, whereas I think the Dr. Manhattan being almost in a way more grounded,
Mhm.
I can infer where that would have come from,
Yeah.
especially with the way they frame it in the movie. Um,
Mhm.
but I don't know. That's just me, I guess.
I feel like this is just me my like final gripe of the differences. The one difference, so obviously the ending is the biggest difference. Like that's
Yeah,
huge. That's absolutely ridiculous. If you're gonna change the ending to that degree, why the heck do we have the little cat, the lynx babatstis, the cat? I don't
Bubastis.
know
Yeah,
why. Because the only reason we have him in the graphic novel is because he was the first experience with the genetic manipulation that then became
yeah.
the squid. Why?
That's
Who's
a really
what's
good
he doing?
point.
What's he doing in the movie then?
Yeah,
Because you're not
because
messing with the genetic manipulation. So where the heck's your links coming from?
yeah, because Bubastis is really out of left field in the movie. Like,
Yeah.
because exactly. Like in the comics, they talk about him going to genetic development and whatever. So like they talk about, yeah, Bubastis was my first creation that really succeeded. So of course
Mhm.
he'd have this reaction, but then you get to the movie and suddenly there's this monster lynx that's
With no explanation in the movie. Like literally
yeah, it
just,
just
oh, here's my cat thing. Why
yeah,
not?
it just like walks
It
around a corner.
yeah, it felt like it was there as a tease for people who had read the graphic novel because
Yeah,
that led us to think that the ending wouldn't be different. Because almost everything else about the ending was exactly the same. Like
pretty much.
the fight scene, the what happens to Rorschach, like all of the other pieces are the exact same except what happens to New York slash the world. And
Hmm.
I'm like, you can't just change that one bit. You can't just
Yeah,
change
that really felt like it came in just for the sake of having the imagery of Bubastis.
that. Mhm. Have them in the
So
promotional materials, and they're like, oh, cool.
yeah.
Yeah. The thing I will say, so now we've kind of discussed a lot of the differences. I want just to give like a little bit of time to the similarities or the things that were done super duper well between the
Oh,
adaptations.
definitely. Because I think
Um,
there's a lot to be said about what they did right in this movie. Because
exactly,
I almost feel
exactly.
like, at least for me, someone who wasn't really into cinema at the time, that was what introduced Zack Snyder to me as a director
Mm-hmm.
because of the job he did on Watchmen.
Oh, interesting. No, I'd seen 300 before that,
See, I had seen
but
300 before that. I didn't know who directed it.
oh, okay, fair. I mean, I became a film student, so we know I'm all about that shit. A film student who reads it before she watches it, though. I'm just gonna throw that out there. Anyway, I the things I loved about the movie is actually part of what is in the graphic novel. At the end of each chapter, there's like a little quote. A lot of them are music quotes.
Mhm.
There's a lot of references to different songs in the graphic novel, and most of those songs are carried over into the movie, and they have just as much, if not the same impact. And
Oh yeah,
I love that. I
the
love it.
musical
The music in the
sequences in
movie,
the movie.
oh, the
They're
only one I'm not a fan of is the Watchtower song when they're invading the base. I'm like, that's so obvious. Get out of here.
right.
That
Yeah.
was just like slapping me in the face. They're called the Watchmen, the Watchtower. Like, let's go. That
As
felt like
opposed to
the audience
say,
was stupid.
yeah, like as opposed to say the sound of silence during Eddie Blake's funeral.
Beautiful,
Yeah,
beautiful.
easily one of my favorite sequences put to of or musical sequences to put to film.
Yeah, that one. And honestly, I give it a lot of shit in my real life, but the sex scene, the sex scene, it is so
Uh,
true to the graphic novel, and it has Hallelujah playing
oh, that
in the
one.
background. Yeah,
Sorry, I was trying to think of
and
like which scene.
yeah, it's like the only true sex scene because
Yeah, yeah, because there's like one and a half sex scenes in the movie.
yeah, depends like what's your definition of sex.
Well, the
Because
first
there's
one
like
did.
the rape scene, the impotent scene, and
I
then
was
there's the
thinking
sex
of the
scene.
one in the living room,
Yeah, and then
the
there's the
one that
rape
almost
scene
didn't
too.
happen. Yeah.
So there's sexual content for anyone who's just curious about it.
Oh
But I
yeah.
think the sex scene music, upon rewatching and rereading, I think they nailed it.
Oh
Because the
yeah.
sex scene represents so much more than sex in the grand scheme of the film and the graphic novel. And I think the inclusion of that song kind of helps that be the case. It's very awkward, But that's very true to the graphic novel, how
Yeah.
unbelievably awkward all the sex scenes are between the two characters, between Silk Spectre and Night Owl. Because I'm calling them by their super names because they're only capable of having sex when they're in their costumes,
I
which
mean,
says
that's
a lot
true.
about like the mental state of all of the costumed people.
Yeah. And I mean, like that's another thing that they get into, um, kind of with like that they touch on with the movie, which
Mhm.
I really liked that they and I mean, nature of adaptation and all that. They don't have time to get into like the nitty gritty other than what they got to with the opening sequence.
Mhm.
But there's so much neuroses that's inherently tied within the characters to their superhero identities,
Yeah.
which is like,
Well, one scene in particular that I wish was in the actual movie, because I've seen the movie and I've seen the extended edition now. In the
yeah,
regular movie, we don't see the death of Hollis Mason. In
yeah,
the
that's true.
extended movie, we do, and that scene really, I think, does such a good job to kind of explain the neuroses and just like the misunderstanding of the real world that some of these heroes have even in retirement, because as he's literally being murdered, like he's getting his shit pushed in by this gang, he is flashing back and forth between his reality of getting hurt and him as his hero self fighting the villains. And
Hmm.
as he swings a punch, you'll see it not connect with the gang member, but it'll connect with that villain in the funny mask or this dude in the funny outfit and this. And it just shows how disconnected he is literally right up to the moment of his death. And I think it adds so much for Night Owl's character, his reaction to Hollis Mason's death. So
Yeah,
I'm really disappointed they took that out, because I think it rounds out his character as honestly more than just like a fanboy of Silk Spectre. Because that's what they made
yeah,
him seem like, especially when they did the flashback scene of him first meeting Silk Spectre and he's like looking at her, but then she's looking at Dr. Manhattan. That's not the case. Like that wasn't true. Their relationship really came out of being the only heroes left at that point and having that connection. That wasn't established previous. So I didn't
yeah.
like that they
Like
felt the need to establish that.
yeah, like he straight up took up the mantle of Night Owl, like once
Yeah,
the old one retired, because he was such a
yeah,
fan of the guy, like the actual
exactly.
guy.
Exactly. He was such a fan, and he in the graphic novel there's a lot more building of their relationship and how he is this father figure to Dan Dryberg, because his own father didn't like him and didn't appreciate the fact that Dan was really into airplanes and ornithology and
Yeah,
mythology, and he was this big old nerd. Whereas Hollis Mason created the Night Owl, so of course they're gonna have this really great relationship and this building of trust that just wasn't
hmm,
established as much in the movie as it could have been. And I didn't love the way they did the gang members in the movie, so I'm kind of happy they're cut out. But I wish
yeah.
Hollis Mason's death was still in the movie, because I think it was bigger than people thought it was in
I
terms
would
of the
definitely
scope
agree
of the
with that.
graphic novel. So
Yeah.
we're supposed to be saying things that I like, and I'm just like, no, more things that make me mad. But I mean, it's technically in the movie if you watch the extended edition, which I don't know if I fully recommend watching the extended edition because it's a lot.
It's like
Three and a
what,
half
3.5
hours.
hours?
It's a
Yeah.
lot. It's a lot to take in. And if there was, I don't know if it exists an extended edition out there that doesn't have the Black Freighter interspersed within. If that exists, watch that and then watch the Black Freighter separate. That would be good viewing. So one final thing, and this is a weird thing that I actually really liked about the movie that is different from the graphic novel, that I appreciated the difference of, is actually the changing of Silk Spectre's outfit.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So that's something
So
that I liked for all the heroes actually.
yeah, especially like hers was super noticeable. The comedian was super noticeable. His second iteration of his outfit, instead of wearing like
Yeah.
the wrestler mask almost, he just had the eyepieces. And
Hmm.
I liked that look better. I thought the other look was stupid. But Silk Spectre
Yeah.
in particular, I really liked, because it it still had the silhouette of her original
Hmm.
outfit. So if we can put up a photo of her movie outfit, it's all that latex, that yellow latex with the black on top. In the graphic novel, that black is the fabric, and everything else is a yellow, like see-through thingy that goes on top. Um,
Yeah, it's a lot more modern.
yeah, this is way, it feels more modern. It still feels just as like sexy as it's really supposed to feel, because it's that really tight latex. It's still very high cut. It still has that silhouette. But
Yeah.
I loved that they changed it. And I don't know necessarily the why behind it, but that previous outfit, there's no way you could film a movie without just all of the poor actress's bits being everywhere. Like, there's no
Yeah,
way you're
pretty
not
much.
slipping all over the place.
Like, it's
So
a very
I
loose
love
outfit,
that. Yeah, it was just like
and
you move at all and you're so exposed, and that's not okay. So
yeah,
I
and,
love
and
that it's still sexy, but it still is feels more functional, I guess.
honestly, yeah,
Kind
and I
of.
think speaking to, although maybe it's more to my personal tastes as far as like superhero designs,
Mhm.
I for as much difference as there was in the actor, I really loved the change that they made to Ozymandias's outfit
Mm.
because it felt
Well,
like it was such like a modern. It had such a like a modern look that I really dug, as opposed to like the one you get in the comics, which is almost like classical Greek Egyptian whatever.
yeah, I think I don't know how I feel because that the graphic novel one felt really, it made sense for his roots, I guess, or
Yeah.
his passions, like his whole Greek thing that he was after. And then this one felt very like Batman and Robin nipple suit to me, which worked, but also
Yeah.
didn't
I think it
pay
I think it
tribute in the way
worked
the previous did.
I think it worked in the sense that it more fit in with, say, Comedian and Night Owl, how
Yeah.
like they had very modern costumes. Even in the comic book, Night Owl had a very
Mhm.
modern costume.
Yeah.
But then you put him next to Ozymandias, who looked
Mhm.
like he would fit with the Minutemen more than the Watchmen.
True. Very, very true. And I mean, the comedian got upgrade, so why not him?
Yeah,
Why not?
true.
And Rorschach, 100% accurate, 100% true, and it
Yeah.
still felt like it made sense for him. I loved the way they did like his shifting mask because that
Okay,
is a
yeah.
thing. That is how the fabric is supposed to work. Like there's a whole story behind that. And
Yeah.
I loved just how they portrayed it in the film. I just thought it was so good. And they added that little nugget scene in the jail cell or in the jail block where he gets his mask back from
Yeah.
his psychiatrist or whatever. That scene's not in the graphic novel.
Mhm.
I appreciate that scene. I loved that. What do you see as he puts the mask on?
Yeah.
Whatever that line was to the doctor just
I think that
felt
was
so good to me.
yeah, for as many things as they did differently from the comic book, I did have to appreciate many of the things that they added. We talk about that intro off the very top, which like
Mhm,
wasn't in the graphic novel at all, but like it does such
mhm,
a good job of portraying the story, and like even the things that they added, or because they had inevitably had to change, like Rorschach getting his mask back, his costume back,
mhm,
like those do such a good job of maintaining sort of the tone of that the movie's carrying,
mhm.
which like
For sure.
that really is such a good line though. What do you see?
Yeah. So, oh, it was
Also,
so epic.
the voice that guy put on.
Oh, so okay, so I did a little Googling, and I feel bad because I already forgot the actor's name. Hurley is
I
the last
I mean,
name.
same.
John Earl Hurley, something of that nature. Correct me if I'm wrong, somebody on the comments. But this actor, I'm giving him mad kudos because the moment there was a whisper in the wind that they were going to make a Watchmen movie. He's like, I need to be Rorschach. Like he went out for that role specifically. Him and his agent filmed his audition tape at home in a makeshift Rorschach outfit.
Oh,
Like that
really?
was how dedicated he was to getting this role, and he's perfect in it. He is
Hmm.
like the casting's good. He is 10 out of 10. Robert Downey Jr., Tony Stark, perfection in my mind for this role. The best scene for him by far is the I'm not locked in here with you. You're locked in
Ooh,
here with
yeah.
me. Oh my
Yeah,
goodness.
that's a line that I've memed many times in the past, but like it is such a good delivery for that
It's so
scene.
iconic and it's in the graphic novel, but we don't see how it's said in the graphic novel because it is
Yeah.
the psychiatrist saying that it was something that was said. So they had enough room to play with how it was going to be said. And I
Hmm.
just thought it was beautiful and perfect. And that whole sequence in the jail, everything with Rorschach, honestly, I don't really have any complaints about his story, the portrayal of his story. I'm pretty happy with it. Like
Yeah, I know.
I
Like
adore
I
him.
yeah, like I've
Minus the
definitely
fact
talked
that he
about
might
like
be
how
racist.
yeah, like I've definitely talked about like how just how much I don't know, conspiracy or hyper conservative whatever there is to Rorschach in the comics, like that they just don't get to in the movie. I've talked about like how much of a difference there is to say how he's described in the book to the handsome man that he is in in the movie. Let's be real here. But that said, there couldn't have been a more perfect casting for Rorschach.
Good for that guy. Good for him. Just kudos for him, because he that was great. He's so good. Best part of the movie, I'd say.
Okay,
Definitely best part.
so I think the big question here then, if someone is completely new to Watchmen, if they haven't read it, if they haven't watched it, heaven forbid this is their first introduction and they don't know any of the plot points, would you tell them to read it first, or would you tell them to watch the movie?
This feels like a really stressful question, even though we wrote this question for this segment.
I mean, it's true, isn't it?
It's stressful. It feels like I have somebody's life in my hands. And no, despite the fact that I'm a self-proclaimed reader and that I read it first, I actually think I would recommend the movie first.
Really?
Yes, because I think the movie is ruined by the graphic novel. If you've read the graphic novel, I don't think you'll get the full enjoyment of the movie, but I don't think it works in reverse. So I think if you watch the movie first and read the graphic novel, you'll still be able to truly appreciate the graphic novel for everything else that it is. Whereas you'll be disappointed with the movie if you read the graphic novel first. But if you don't know what you're missing, it feels like a complete, pretty good film. So I would say do that. So watch the movie, read the graphic novel, then watch the TV show. Because the TV show comes from the graphic novel ending. So in that order, it will all make sense to you.
That makes sense.
What do you think? What's your
so
same question?
God, that really is stressful, isn't it?
Right?
Okay, so I'm a self-proclaimed watcher. Usually I tend to watch the thing because, I don't know, it works towards my easily distracted mind or whatever. And then if I liked it enough, I'll go back to the source material, which has happened on several occasions. For as much love as I give the graphic novel, I think I agree with you 100%. I would say watch the movie because it really is like its own 100% self-contained thing. And then if you like the movie, the graphic novel has so much more to offer you. So I would say watch the movie, then read the graphic novel for all the additional context that it delivers. And I can't speak to the TV show, but I guess watch that afterwards.
Yeah, watch it. Of
Yeah.
all the things, I feel like the TV show. No, I like the graphic novel a lot. The TV show's just as good. I was gonna say the TV show's better, but I'm like, that's aggressive of a statement, and I don't know if I fully support that. But it's very good also. So you get 3 really solid Watchmen things. So if you like any of them, you'll like, I think, all of them truly, because they carry enough similarities for you to enjoy all of them. So that's where we're at.
Yeah,
so
we have our answer.
We did it. Good job, everybody. Pat on the back. So
high
this
five.
has been I was like, can we do it it's like a slap of the camera. It's not like a virtual high five. It doesn't work quite as good. What if we did boop? Doesn't work. No such thing as a virtual high five. Sorry, everybody.
I'm afraid not. Although if you want to slide your screen.
Let me end this, Ashton. So with all of that said, this has been Reader Watch. We talked about the Watchmen graphic novel and the Watchmen movie, which I don't have a physical copy of because, stream it online. So thank you so much for watching. I've been Michelle.
I've been Ashton.
So make sure you like, comment, subscribe, do all of the YouTube thingamajigs. Check out our social medias. They are down below. And that's it. We will see you in the next one. Bye.